You're looking at a glue up that I've had sitting around for quite a while, and I'm going to use this to answer some questions I've had on how I do my sanding, because I've been asked to explain it or to maybe make a video on my sanding techniques. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to try to explain how I work my way through the grits, and I've been asked about the direction that I let my lathe turn when I sand, because I do like sanding in reverse on the outside of it, and I'll show you why and what I think is good about it. I want to say right now, if your lathe doesn't have reverse, that does not mean you cannot get an equally good sanding job. So starting with using discs, I work my way through the discs. If I start with 80, and I have 80, 120, 180, 240, 320, and 400. One thing about the 80 grit is there might be stones that are glued on here that are slightly higher than the other ones. If you start with a new disc, and you want to do this with all your discs, you want to use it until the disc breaks down and everything is on the same level. Otherwise you could leave a big scratch that you might not see, and you're not going to get that sanded away with the finer grit that follows this. So if I start with 80, and I'll be using my power sander here, and when I sand on the inside, I sand it with the lathe going forward. I usually somewhere around 400 RPM depending on the diameter of the piece. And I want to sand with the upper part of that disc like that. I want it flat, and I want to tilt it up like that. That's going to keep it from grabbing. If you're down here, you could have some issues. So you want to be aware of the direction your sandpaper is sitting. I'm not going to use my dust collector because it's noisy and the overhead filter, so I'll just use a face mask. I'll have to stop, take it off, and tell you a little bit more about it, but I'll do a little sanding and tell you what's going on. We're right at 400. You can see that's made quite a bit of dust. So now I'll stop after sanding to where it looks like it's smooth. And I want to examine it. I want to make sure that I don't have any heavy scratches. You're going to have equal scratches, but they shouldn't have one prominent one. That means you got to keep sanding until that's gone. Then you can switch to a finer disc and do the same thing. I don't think we need to work all the way through the disc, but I'm going to go to a 120 now and show you the same thing. The important thing here is that you examine your work and you look to make sure you don't have a scratch that stands out from the rest. There will be scratches here. There'll be, that was 120. There'll be the same kind of a scratch you have from a 120 disc. But you need to keep this, you want to keep it moving. You don't want to stop in one spot. And keep switching until you get to the 400 and you should be ready for a finish. Okay, I've got this set up and I'll show you some of the reasons I sand in reverse, and that's with the lathe spinning that way. So number one reason, and I probably started doing that over 50 years ago. I had a small Craftsman lathe, had step pulleys on it, had a capacitor start motor, and those motors had schematics to show you which direction you wanted to spin the motor. You could go this direction or that direction. Well, I put a three-way switch in it so I could go forward and backwards, because when you're turning, your finish would be lifting the wood up as you cut. You might not see it, but it's there. So by sanding it in reverse, after that you knock that down and you get it nice and smooth. Now you don't have to have that. If you have a lathe today that only goes forward, You just maybe got to sand a little bit longer. You can get it. I don't want you to think you have to go get a lathe that runs in reverse. But I have one that does it, so I take advantage of it. The other reason is my dust collector system. I have a flexible hose right above there. I pull that down to hang it here, I open up the intake, and the dust shoots right at it, goes in it. It even goes in it if I'm sanding forward. It tends to go that way. So that's the other reason. One more reason, and this is based off the smaller lathe that I had. If you're sanding on the underside, I'll just kind of show you here. Put it forward. And if you're sanding with paper, because back then, that's all I ever sanded with. And that's all I ever sanded with at work, was sheets of paper. And I did turnings up to 6 foot or more in diameter and sanded them with sheets of paper. But if you're doing it this and there's not much room underneath and something grabs, see that paper just took off. So if you use a coarse grit, this is not, this is 220, but that you can touch it and grab it, and if you're hanging onto the paper, you better let go, otherwise you're going to go in there with it. So it's a safety thing. Again, be cautious with how you hold the sandpaper, and it's fine to sand that way. Sanding in reverse with paper, if it did that, it just went over there. There's nothing up here to get jammed into if something was to pull you down in there. I'm not trying to scare you about sanding, and just pointing out that I have a lathe that goes that way. I prefer to do it for multiple reasons. I just adjusted the camera so you can see how the power sander works here. And you can get away with sanding flat, but if you tilt it up away from there with the lathe going this way, it just keeps it from grabbing it. If you got the lathe going that way and you're sanding on the heel of this pad, it just doesn't work as good. So I'll show you that a little bit. Again, if you start with your 80 grit, stop, have a look at it, make sure you don't have any heavy scratches. You'll have scratches, but they all want to look like they're on the same level, and go to the next disc. And I think I said before, you gotta, if they're brand new disc, you gotta sand with it for a while until they all break down and they're on that same level. This happens to be a segmented turning, and when I sand segmented work, I generally only use sheets of paper, and that's because the grain is going the direction of the rotation, so I can get a really nice finish out of there. I don't have to worry about if the grain is going this way and you sand, you'll get deep scratches, but when you're going with the grain, it really sands nice. So I'll use sheets like this. I'll hang on to it like that in my fingers. If it does grab, I just move my thumb away and it takes off. I don't want to wrap my hand around it or anything. I just want to grip it like this and go like that. And I put the pressure with the other hand on it, and I just keep moving it. The advantage of this is if you have a shape on here, if you keep moving across it, you're not going to sand that shape away. You don't want to stop in one spot. You don't want to stop in one spot using a power sander either. So that's some of the things that I like doing when I sand. The biggest thing is inspect every step that you do. This looks perfect right here. Once I got up to 400, the finish will be fantastic. That's how you get a good finish. It's from your sanding. Probably the most important thing to a good finish is to have a good sanding job. So I've been asked a number of times, oh, you got a new sander, how do you like it? Why did you get it? Did your other one die? No, actually that thing's still going strong. But it has a cord on it, and I plug it in towards the floor on the headstock side of my lathe here. And if I want to stop while I'm sanding, I might set it down like this. Go get a cup of coffee. I get right at the end of the lathe, and that cord comes from nowhere, tries to wrap around my foot, trip me. So after I had my ankle surgery, I was very cautious trying to hobble around with that cord. And even when it's all healed up and still kind of learning how to walk properly, that cord just kept trying to trip me. So what an excuse to get myself a brand new sander, and I really love it a lot. So sander works great. You don't have that cord messing with you. There is one thing, it does run on batteries, and if you don't have a spare and you don't keep it charged, you say you're almost done and you say, oh, the battery's dead, I want to get some finish on it. What do I do? Do I charge it? Oh, it looks good enough. Well, there's that old thing, it looks good enough. No, make sure it's good enough. It's not that it looks good enough. You really got to examine it. So, I don't know, somebody must have been watching my videos. It's a company called Van Batteries. And they said, how would you like to try one of these really good sized batteries? That thing will last forever. And I thought, sure, I wouldn't mind trying it. If it doesn't work out on my sander, which is only slightly heavier, I think, we have like a leaf blower and a weed whacker that uses batteries, and they have kind of small ones on there. I think this would last for a long time to blow the leaves, and boy do we have a lot of leaves around here. So anyways, that's the other point. If your battery's dying and you think you're almost done, maybe you're not done. Charge it up and finish it, make it look good. So that's about it for this video. I hope there's some information that you found valuable. And remember, this Friday, a new wood turning video, and I guarantee you it's going to be pretty cool.